What happens when a group of survivors finally gets what they've been fighting for? A safe place, a working hospital, a source of electricity, and most importantly, people who were once enemies finally agreeing to live together. You would think the worst is over, but this is The Walking Dead, and whenever peace finally arrives, that's usually when something goes terribly wrong. In Season 3, Episode 4, titled Found/Lost, Maggie's new Manhattan community is about to face one of its biggest tests yet. Maggie and Luis leave the safety of their home in search of desperately needed medical supplies. Their destination? A mysterious figure known as the Traitor. But while Maggie is outside trying to secure the resources her people need, Negan and Renata are left behind to protect the community. And that's where things become dangerous, because the community may be stronger than it was before, but it is still incredibly fragile, and one mistake could bring everything crashing down. Maggie is away, Luis is with her, Negan and Renata are protecting the settlement. The hospital needs supplies, the walkers are being used for electricity, and Dillard is becoming increasingly obsessed with the dead. Which brings us to one of the strangest mysteries in the entire season. Maggie has spent years surviving, but now she's doing something much harder. She's building. That's an important distinction. Survival means finding food today. Building means making sure people have food tomorrow. Survival means treating one injury. Building means creating a hospital. Survival means avoiding enemies. Building means convincing enemies to become neighbors. That's exactly what Maggie and Renata are trying to accomplish. But building a community creates a new problem: resources. You can have the strongest walls in Manhattan, but if your hospital has no medicine, those walls won't save anyone. That's why Maggie and Luis have to leave. They need supplies, and their only real option may be the Traitor. But there's something suspicious about this arrangement. The Traitor has resources. Maggie needs those resources. That sounds like a simple business transaction, except nothing in the apocalypse is simple. Every deal creates leverage, every favor creates a debt, and every person with resources eventually realizes how much power they have. The Traitor knows Maggie needs medicine. The Traitor knows Luis is a doctor. And the Traitor knows Maggie's community is growing. That could make this meeting far more important than it first appears, because Maggie isn't just negotiating for a box of medical equipment. She's negotiating for the future of her community, and the preview suggests the meeting does not go according to plan. Maggie and Luis become caught in a hostile situation. Something is revealed, the atmosphere changes, and Maggie is forced to protect Luis. Think about how dangerous that is. They are away from home. They don't have the full community behind them. They don't know exactly who they're dealing with, and Luis is carrying a responsibility that can't easily be replaced. So Maggie has to make a choice. Does she continue the deal? Does she walk away? Does she fight? Or does she risk everything to get Luis home safely? This is what makes Maggie such an interesting character. She has always been willing to put herself in danger, but now she isn't only fighting for herself, she's fighting for other people, and that changes everything. Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Negan is doing something almost nobody would have expected from him. He's helping. Not because he's suddenly become innocent, not because Maggie has forgotten his past, and not because Negan has stopped being Negan. He's helping because he understands that the community needs someone who can deal with threats. That's where Negan fits. Maggie may be the heart of the new community. Renata may be one of its strongest builders. Luis may be its healer. But Negan? Negan is the weapon. And perhaps the most fascinating part is that he doesn't need to be the leader anymore. He can simply be useful. That may actually be the beginning of Negan's redemption. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but usefulness without domination. Still, there's a problem. The community is trying to create order in a world built around chaos, and the walkers don't care about either. The hospital's power system is incredibly risky. If the walkers remain contained, everything works. If they escape, the hospital becomes a death trap. Imagine the situation. Patients are already vulnerable. Some are injured, some can't move quickly. Medical workers are already exhausted. Then suddenly, the creatures being used to generate power break free. It would turn the hospital from a symbol of hope into a killing zone. And that's exactly the kind of irony The Walking Dead loves. The survivors have found a way to use the dead to keep the living alive, but the dead may not remain under control. And while all of this is happening, Dillard is facing a much more personal problem. His relationship with the walkers is becoming increasingly disturbing. Dillard talks to them, he watches them, he appears to believe that they understand them, and one particular walker has become especially important, Titicaca. Dillard seems convinced that she can communicate with him, and he appears to believe she has feelings for him. At first, this could simply be a strange character detail, but Episode 3 makes the situation much more significant, because viewers are allowed to experience the encounter from Dillard's perspective. Titicaca appears to answer him. She seems to ask him to stay, and Dillard interprets this as a genuine emotional connection. But here's the question. Is she really talking? Or is Dillard hearing what he desperately wants to hear? That distinction could change the entire storyline, because The Walking Dead has introduced many types of walker variants. We've seen walkers that are more intelligent, walkers capable of climbing, walkers capable of manipulating objects. We've seen dangerous variants in Daryl Dixon. We've even seen burners with horrifying physical abilities. But a naturally speaking walker? That would be a completely different development. It wouldn't simply make one walker more dangerous. It would change our understanding of the dead. And that's why Dillard's mental state may be the more likely explanation. He is isolated, he's emotionally unstable, and he's developed an unusual attachment to the dead. Maybe the walker isn't speaking. Maybe Dillard is translating meaningless sounds into words. Maybe he's giving the walker emotions that don't exist. And if that's true, Dillard could be heading toward a devastating psychological breakdown. But there's another possibility. What if he's right?
This is where Episode 4 could become much bigger than a simple supply mission, because Dillard may have accidentally stumbled onto one of the biggest mysteries in the Walking Dead universe. Can walkers communicate? For years, the answer seemed obvious. No. They're dead. They react to movement, they react to sound, they attack. They don't have human conversation. But the franchise has slowly challenged that idea. Walker variants have become smarter, more adaptive, more dangerous, and now Dillard appears to be having conversations with one. But there's a major difference between a walker behaving intelligently and a walker actually speaking. If Titicaca is genuinely talking, then something extraordinary has happened, and the consequences could extend far beyond Dillard. Imagine another character walks into Dillard's room. They hear Titicaca, and they hear actual words. Suddenly, everything changes. But if someone else hears only growling, then the mystery becomes psychological, and that could actually be more disturbing, because Dillard may be creating an emotional relationship with something incapable of loving him back. Think about what that says about his character. The apocalypse has destroyed normal human connection. People have disappeared, communities have collapsed, and Dillard may have found the only companion he believes can never abandon him. Because the dead don't judge you, they don't argue, they don't leave. At least, that's what Dillard may believe, and that could explain why he's becoming so attached. But now imagine this problem happening at the exact same time the community is under pressure. Maggie is away, Luis is away, Negan is protecting the settlement, Renata is helping reinforce it. The hospital needs power. The hospital also needs medicine, and the walkers may be getting loose. Everything is connected. One problem creates another. If the walkers escape, the hospital could lose power. If the hospital loses power, patients become vulnerable. If patients become vulnerable, the community becomes unstable. If the community becomes unstable, the newly united factions could begin fighting again. And if Maggie returns without the supplies, the situation becomes even worse. That's why the traitor is so important. The traitor represents the outside world. Maggie is trying to create a peaceful society, but she can't isolate that society forever. Other groups exist. Other communities exist. Other people have their own interests, and not all of them will believe in Maggie's vision. Some may see her community as an opportunity. Others may see it as a threat. And some may simply want what she has. That's how civilizations collapse. Not always because of walkers. Sometimes because people want the same resources. That's what makes the traitor potentially dangerous. The traitor may not be a villain, but the traitor doesn't have to be a villain to create conflict. They simply have to want something Maggie doesn't want to give. And suddenly, a negotiation becomes a confrontation. This is also where Negan's role becomes extremely interesting, because Maggie is learning how difficult peaceful diplomacy can be. Negan has spent years using intimidation, and now he has to learn something completely different. How do you protect people without becoming their dictator? How do you keep order without creating fear? How do you stop violence without becoming the person who controls everyone? Those questions are at the heart of Negan's storyline. And perhaps that's why his relationship with Maggie has changed. They still have history, they still have pain, but they are finally learning that survival may require them to trust each other. Not completely, not emotionally, but strategically. And sometimes, that's enough. But then there's Herschel. Herschel is watching all of this, and Negan's relationship with him is one of the most complicated relationships in the story. Herschel knows what Negan did. He knows why his mother hates him. He knows the history. And yet he is now living in a community where Negan is helping protect everyone. That's a difficult reality for a young person to process. Negan isn't simply a monster anymore, but he isn't innocent either. He's something more complicated. A man trying to become useful in a world where his past refuses to disappear. And perhaps that's the larger theme of Season 3. Can people really change? Can enemies become allies?
Can people who have lost everything build something new? And can the living learn to coexist with the world the dead have created? Dillard's storyline may be the darkest version of that question. He isn't trying to destroy the dead. He's trying to understand them. Maybe too much. And if he is wrong about Titicaca, the consequences could be heartbreaking. But if he's right, then the consequences could be enormous. By the time we reach episode 4, Maggie's community is in a strange position. For the first time in a long time, things are actually looking better. People are cooperating, the hospital is functioning, new alliances are forming. Negan is helping, Maggie has a vision. Renata believes in it. And the community has something resembling a future. But that future creates a new kind of fear. Because now, they have something to lose. That's the most important idea behind this episode. When Maggie had nothing, she could take enormous risks. Now she has people depending on her. Luis depends on her. The hospital depends on her. Herschel depends on her. The new community depends on her. And that means every decision becomes more complicated. When she meets the traitor, she can't simply think about herself. She has to think about everyone back home. That's why the mission matters. It's not simply, Maggie goes looking for medicine. It's, Maggie risks her life to protect the future she has spent years trying to build. And that makes the danger much more personal. But while Maggie searches for something valuable, the people back home are trying to protect what they've already found. Negan and Renata are reinforcing the community. They are preparing for trouble. And they may need to deal with the walkers. The very walkers that power their hospital could become their biggest threat. That irony is impossible to ignore. The survivors have transformed death into energy, but death has a way of fighting back. And then there is Dillard. Dillard may be the wild card nobody can predict. If he continues becoming emotionally attached to Titicaca, he could put the community in danger. Because what happens when someone tries to take the walker away? What happens if Titicaca escapes? What happens if Dillard refuses to kill her? And what happens if he believes she is asking him to protect her? These questions could become extremely important later in the season. Because Dillard's story may not be about a talking walker at all. It may be about loneliness. It may be about trauma. It may be about a man who has lost so much that he has begun creating relationships where none exist. And if that's the case, Dillard isn't simply strange. He's tragic. He's a reminder that surviving physically doesn't mean surviving mentally. That's something The Walking Dead has explored since the beginning. The apocalypse changes people. Some become stronger, some become cruel, some become leaders, and some lose themselves. Dillard may be moving toward that last category. Now let's return to Maggie. Her biggest challenge isn't simply getting the medicine. It's figuring out who she can trust. The traitor could help her, or the traitor could become a problem. The new factions could become allies, or they could eventually turn against one another. Negan could become a valuable protector, or his past could eventually destroy the trust he's building. And Dillard could be harmless, or he could become a serious threat. That is why Season 3 feels different. The danger isn't only coming from outside. It's coming from relationships, trust, trauma, fear, and ambition. The walkers are still there, but they're no longer the only thing the characters need to worry about. And that's why the title Found Lost so fitting. Maggie is trying to find resources, but she could lose security. The community has found peace, but it could lose that peace. Negan has found a purpose, but he could lose the trust he's beginning to earn. Dillard believes he's found companionship, but he may actually be losing touch with reality. And the people of Manhattan have found something they haven't had in years. Hope. But hope can be dangerous. Because once you have hope, you become afraid of losing it. That may be the real horror of episode 4. Not the walkers, not the traitor, not even the violence. It's the possibility that this community could actually mech. Because if it does, then everyone finally has something worth fighting for. And if it fails, the loss will hurt more than anything they've experienced before. So as Maggie and Luis venture deeper into Manhattan, searching for the resources their hospital desperately needs, the question isn't simply whether they will find what they're looking for. It's whether they will return safely. Back home, Negan and Renata are trying to protect a community that is still learning how to trust itself. But the walkers powering the hospital may be about to remind everyone that the dead are never truly under control. And somewhere inside that same community, Dillard is looking at a walker and seeing something no one else can see. A friend, a companion, maybe even someone who loves him. But is Titicaca really speaking? Or is Dillard simply hearing the voice he desperately needs? That mystery could become one of the season's biggest surprises. And if the answer turns out to be the one nobody expects, the rules of The Walking Dead could change forever. Maggie wanted to build a future. Negan wanted to prove he could protect it. Renata wanted people to stop fighting. Luis wanted to save lives. And Dillard just wanted someone to understand him. But in Manhattan, everybody wants something. And eventually, someone has to pay the price. The biggest questions are now clear. Will Maggie and Luis make a successful deal with the traitor? Will they make it home safely? Will the hospital walkers break loose? Can Negan and Renata keep the community together? And most importantly, is Dillard really communicating with Titicaca? Because if the answer is yes, we may be looking at something the Walking Dead universe has never seen before. But if the answer is no, then Dillard could be heading toward one of the darkest psychological storylines in the entire franchise. Either way, the peaceful community Maggie has worked so hard to create is about to be tested. And when the dead start moving, the living may discover just how fragile their new world really is.